Hey, Drew James here from LearnGuitarInLondon.com, and I'm going to be sharing with you 4 of my favourite tips for bar chords. Over teaching people for the last 22 years, I have found that these 4 things are really helpful to make your bar chords sing, and also to get you to change from open chord to bar chord. At the end of this video, there is 3 chord progressions that I suggest you practice to start getting those bar chords sounding as good as you can and as clean and as quick as you can. Let's get started. When you learn chords, you often put your fingers down systematically in an order. So for example, the G chord, you might have put it down like this and gone index, middle and ring. When you get really good at chords, you start to put your fingers down instantaneously. They kind of make the shapes and they just happen. So what happens when it comes to bar chords? Well, they're often the biggest challenge for beginner players. And once again, systematically, I've seen people put them down in various different orders. But the order that I suggest is to go through the strongest fingers of the hand and do it in that order. So that would mean index, middle, ring and pinky in that order. So the index finger, if I make a B minor, index finger first, then middle finger finding fret 3 on the B string, and then ring and pinky, ring on fret 4 and pinky finger on fret 4 on the G. So that is index, middle, ring and pinky, okay? Now the more times you do bar chords like your opens, the more you will be putting them down instantaneously. But if you're trying to think, well, maybe I'll try this ring and pinky first, then the bar, then the middle, do go for the stronger fingers, just to reiterate that point. And over time, what will happen is as your bar finger goes down, your middle will naturally be dragged down and your ring and pinky will start to go down as a unit. They might even lift off as a unit. You can see my fingers are staying together rather than going like this and then there's daylight between these. So locking them together. So that's the order: index, middle, ring and pinky. When you learn open chords, you generally keep your fingers in the middle of the frets. You can see I'm playing an A suspended second here and I'm keeping my fingers well in the frets. Now, we're told never to touch the frets, so this would be very improper technique. When it comes to bar chords, with this index finger that lays down initially, if we keep that in the middle of the fret and then make our bar chord, it makes it quite a bit harder to stretch out these fingers, which is already difficult enough because you're pressing down with this finger and stretching over with these. So instead of having this bar finger here, you can just move it much closer to the fret, okay? So you can get it nice and snug and close. You don't actually want to be touching over the fret because that's going to potentially cause a little bit of muting and get a sort of dull sound, but you want to keep it just behind. And just a bonus tip here, keep this index finger straight up. If you do feel that you need to turn a little bit, that's just because your muscles need to grow and develop. But always try to aim for this finger staying straight up. Bar chords are pretty much 80% persistence, practice, playing them a lot, and 20% technique. Now we're dealing with that 20%, and a big part of that 20% is the thumb position with the bar chord. Now the thumb position is critical to getting a good sounding bar chord, and also being able to train the muscles to grow effectively to be able to press down a bar chord. So when you're making an open chord, your thumb's up here, it's generally kind of chilling above the neck. Unless you're a classical player and you've been told to always keep it round the neck and you've got a lovely big round neck to do so. Generally the thumb sort of chills up here for most people when you're doing open chords. When you do a bar chord, if you try and do a bar with your thumb up there in that position, it's impossible. You cannot straighten the finger, you cannot do a thing. So you're probably aware that you do need to move the thumb. Now some people might move the thumb to about this position, okay? And try to create their bar. And what will happen is their bar finger will go wonky. It will point straight towards their face and it will have an angle to it. Now the goal here is to try and keep the bar finger as straight as possible. And the one way to do that is to bring that thumb much further around the neck than you would normally. It needs to come so far around the neck that it is beyond the halfway point, which is here, and down a little further still. Okay, so you are using the curvature of the neck, pressing upwards towards the ceiling. That's the best way of putting it. You see, I'm pushing with my thumb there. The other thing is the part of the thumb I'm using. I'll show you on this camera here, right? So the part of the thumb, I'm using this joint here of the thumb to press. I'm actually not using much of this fleshy part at all. I'm using the bone on the joint of the thumb to press up with that diagonal pressure that I talked about through the neck. In terms of thumb positioning as well, Notice how the thumb isn't straight. I'm not keeping it like this, I'm keeping it at an angle. Now this does depend on people's hand sizes. If you've got bigger hands, you may find that your thumb will straighten up, but if you've got smaller hands, you'll find that it will curl round. And so basically the tip of my thumb is pointing towards the head of the guitar. It doesn't matter what bar chord I'm doing, you can see that my thumb is always more than halfway round and pressing with that part. I'm just going to put a load of pressure on that part of my thumb and then show it to you on this camera so you can see that it is slightly white there where I've been pressing, you see? That's what you want to be looking for. So thumb position is critical. Bring it round far. Bring your wrist in front of the instrument and bring your elbow into your body. Get that thumb position right and your bar chords are going to sound great. Let's talk about perhaps the biggest physical challenge that anybody faces when they're learning guitar, and that is going from an open chord into a bar chord. By far the most daunting, challenging thing that anybody ever faces when they start learning guitar. And I'm going to look at 3 common examples that happens in like thousands of songs, okay? So let's look at perhaps the most famous, which is C to an F. Okay, now I'm going to give you some tips on what to do when you're going to that F, but nothing on the face of this earth is going to make any difference apart from dedicated daily practice. Now you can do that quite systematically by just doing the chord progressions that I'm going to show you. Okay, so there's going to be 3 chord progressions and I'm going to show you how to do that. You can do that to improve that way. A slightly more creative way is to do it in songs, choosing some songs. There's actually a list of bar chord songs at the Learn Guitar in London website precisely for this reason. So let's look at the C to F. Here's our C chord, index, middle and ring. As we make that change into F, you'll see the first thing is that my thumb's over the top here. Now when I go to the F, my thumb disappears. So the thumb is disappearing around the back, but the bar finger is the first thing that is laying down. You can see so just changing from this to that would be a great practice. And just seeing if when you strum it, you can make all those strings ring. That would be a great practice. That checks that your thumb's in the right position and that you are pressing down. If you can't get every string to ring like this, especially on this first fret with the nut here, it makes it a lot harder to do, essentially. You can try it up here on 5 or 7 to see if you can get everything to ring. But if you can't get it straight off, it's just you don't have the muscles to do it yet. Persevere, continue. So when you've done this, you're moving your middle finger down here to the G string and your ring and pinky on fret 4 on the A and the D. So in terms of the tips, there isn't a big tips on this. I'd keep your ring finger's going to stay in that position as you move to the bar chord. The ring finger doesn't move, but the middle finger needs to take that journey down 1 string and then the pinky needs to follow. Okay, so here we go again from here. You can see I'm leaving my ring finger there. Okay, so that's the first chord progression that I would suggest practicing. C, F, just doing 1 strum for each. Seeing how quickly you can make it, okay? You can also time yourself for 60 seconds, see how many changes you can do in 60 seconds, and then try and beat that the next day. It's another little tip. Next, another really common one is G to B minor, okay? Now G to B minor is a great starter chord progression because the index finger from the G stays in that position. It just turns and straightens up, lays close to the fret marker, middle finger comes down on the B string on fret 3 and ring and pinky on fret 4 on the D and G. So keeping the index finger stationary and keeping it where it is, not doing this, lifting everything up and laying it down, that's important, okay? So once again, that's another progression to practice, G to B minor, see how many you can do. You might find that a bit easier than C to F. And finally, E to F sharp minor. Okay, now this one, there is actually a slightly cheats way you can do. You can do your E minor with the ring and pinky finger like this. You see what I'm doing? You would never normally do E minor like this, but when you're going to F sharp minor, you can just slide this up to fret 2 and lay down the bar finger behind. Perhaps the biggest challenge with this is actually not using the middle finger because the bar finger is reliant on actually pressing down those strings a little bit more. So here we go with an E chord, slide the ring and pinky up, keep them locked together, lay the bar finger down, then move it back. If you want to keep it a little bit more what your muscle memory is telling you for an E minor, then I use middle and ring, and then lay the bar finger, ring and pinky down. So quick recap on those chords. Practice C to F, round in a circle, G to B minor, and E to F sharp minor. That happens a lot in a lot of songs, and that will get you a really good way ahead. I would suggest doing that for no more than 5 minutes, maybe 10 if you've been playing a bit longer in a practice. And also don't forget to put them into songs.